Hi everyone, I'm glad you made it back to episode 4. This is the episode where I'm going to be scarfing my plywood. As you may have noticed, I scarfed 6 sheets of it already. I have plenty more to go that I can show you how I do it. Um, I thought I would take a few minutes now to show you how I set this up. If you read about scarfing, lots of different opinions from different people on how they like to do it. You hear 8-to-1 scarf, 10-to-1, 12-to-1. I figured those were the most common, so I figured why not do a 10-to-1? And the math is a little easier when you do a 10-to-1. This is 1/2-inch plywood, so a 10-to-1 scarf joint would mean that when I'm setting this up, that I draw a line from the front edge of the plywood. I go back 5 inches. 1/2 inch is 0.5 on a decimal. 0.5 times 10 is 5 inches. So that's how I did it. I lined them all up on those lines, clamped it down. As I was doing it, what you want to do is prop up the back of the plywood so that it's putting pressure on the front edge here to stay down without lifting up. There's a few spots where I can see that it lifted up. And then you want to clamp it down, give yourself some room for your planer to be able to go get the back of the planer so the clamps aren't in the way. And you can clamp the plywood together also because you don't want it sliding around once you start doing this. And my biggest problem was I was using an older power planer that I had, and it's a 4 3/8 wide blade. It seems to be kind of hard to find those now, and I went ahead and used it. These blades were really dull, and it was kind of pulling and chipping and the plywood probably just as much as cutting it. And I still managed to, in the end, I used my random orbit sander to clean it up a little bit. I have a hand planer too that I dressed it up a bit towards the end. But I couldn't find new blades for it, so I went out and I bought myself a new 3 1/4 inch planer. That seems to be the common one now, and I took a few passes on this with it just to touch it up, and it's what a difference with sharp blades, and I knew it would be a huge difference. It cuts like butter, makes a way better chip, and it's a lot smoother and faster too. But I'm going to move these off to the side. I'll take 6 more sheets, put it in here, and you'll be able to watch to see how I do it. I'll give you a little close-up here of if I can get this thing in here. You can probably see right here where this came to a real feathered edge. I try not to get it that way. If you come down here, this might be a little easy to see on this angle. This edge here, there's still a little bit of the, it's a little bit flat, it's very slightly flat on that edge, that one too. A lot of people like the feathered edge. I'm not crazy about it because, as you can see, it kind of got a little wiggly. But your goal here is if you look at the grain, I'm trying to get a right angle here for you where you can see what I'm talking about. But if you look at the grain of the different plies, you try to keep those as straight a line as you possibly can. And it'd be easier on this side. You know, I think it's impossible to get them perfectly straight. That would be kind of crazy thinking without a machine, and these things clamp down really hard. You know, as you can see right here, if you can see that where it springs up a little bit, so naturally that's going to be up a bit, and it's going to take some off, and that's why I try not to get it right down to a feathered edge. And there's a spot where it chipped out on the end, but I think this will work out just fine. The trick here, I think, is with the epoxy to make sure you get a good unthickened coat saturated into the plywood first. Let it sink in, maybe even set up for a little bit, and then go back and put your thickened epoxy on and weight it down on the joint and just let it set overnight, and then come back and sand down the joint, get the excess squeeze out of epoxy off of it, and then just be careful with when you start to bend it into shape. And I'll try to get you a view here on the side where you can start to see where I put boards under it, and that's to load up the front of the plywood where I'll be cutting it. And then that clamp right there, the C-clamp, is to hold everything in place, or the plywood sheets together, and then I have these clamps right here that I clamp it down to my strong back so it doesn't shift. I doubt it would shift anyways, but because of the weight. But anyways, I'll move this off to the side, like I said, and I'll get another fresh set of boards set up, and you can see how I do this process. Okay, now I have 6 more sheets set up, ready for planing, for scarfing, and I'll go over the setup with you again. You can see from the end here, I have these spaced out by 5 inches a piece. What I do is I set the square for 5 inches. I put it up against the front face of the board. I draw a line at the end of the ruler. I'll do the same thing on this end. Then I take the ruler, I draw a line across. Then I take the next sheet of plywood, put it on top here, and I line it up with the 5-inch line that I drew across the previous sheet. Then I do that all the way up. You're basically doing, I guess, a small set of stairs. You can see the last sheet here. I have my 5-inch line, my pencil mark, and this time I wanted to try and load it up a little more. You can see how high up it is right there, and you can see underneath where I propped it up with some 2x4s. Those are my C-clamps. There's one on the other side also. That's holding my sheets of plywood together so they don't slide from each other. And I'm using these clamps here to pull pressure downward on the plywood, and that's basically just to load up the front here so that if there's any bow in the plywood, that it'll keep it sitting flat on the sheet in front of it, and that will prevent what you saw on the first video I showed you of tearing it out more, we'll say, here than here if this is curving up in the air. But that's my new power planer. I'll be using that. It should make some pretty quick work of getting it pretty close, and then I'll just dress it up with my random orbit sander and the hand plane. And the last thing that I didn't mention in the last little video, that the last thing I like to do is I'll just take, I have a longboard that I use, a short longboard. It's only 18 inches, but I'll use that. I have a 40 grit sandpaper, and I just go along the edges. Very last thing I'll do, and the reason I do that is I like to get just some really rough tooth to the plywood, so that when I coat it with the epoxy, it gives it something to grip onto. So let's get on to planing. One thing I should probably mention is you may want to wear at least a dust mask. I don't have one handy, so I'm going to wear my respirator, because this does make a pretty fair amount of dust, and it certainly makes, this will probably make a couple of 5-gallon bucket loads of shavings, believe it or not. Every once in a while I'll have to stop to clear everything off with the broom. I'll sweep around the floor so I can stand on a flat floor as opposed to a pile of wood shavings. But good idea to wear your respirator, or at least a decent dust mask. Another thing you want to wear too is some ear protection, because it does get very noisy. I got these little foam earplugs. They seem to be adequate enough. So I'm done with these 6 sheets. I think they came out a lot better than the first 2. A lot of that I think has to do with using sharp blades, or brand new blades on a brand new planer, and a little more preload on the plywood to keep the edges down. I did have areas right down here in the front, or along the side edges, like that. That's probably me getting a little too aggressive. I should have backed the planer off a little sooner. You can see right there, and just a little bit on that other edge. But it has a little bit more of what I was looking for. It held right along here, the front edges, instead of a real feathered edge, it kind of left a little tiny bit of a square there, which is what I like to do. But the lines, they even look a lot straighter, the glue lines from the plies in the wood. But I've never watched anyone in person scarfing plywood before, but feel free to make a comment if you'd like. I'd love to hear from everybody, just to see what you think of my scarfing technique here as compared to what you would have done. So I cleared everything off the table, and I have a stack of plywood with the scarves in them on this end. I have another stack standing up against the wall on that end. As you can see, my biggest problem in here sometimes is the size of the shop for doing stuff like this, because you need a lot of room for scarfing and gluing the plywood together. But I managed to work with what I have here, and I've already mixed up a small batch of epoxy. It's way more than I'm going to need, but right now I'm just going to coat each side of the plywood along the scarf where the scarf joint's going to be, and I'll let it set in for a little while, and then I'll mix up a batch of thickened epoxy, apply it. I'll have to flip this one over, get it set up in place, and I'll use the blocks again to hold the plywood down at the joint until it all sets up. To keep these lined up, I have a clamp here and a clamp right here. I drew a straight line all the way along the edge of my lofting table, and I'll know when I flip this back over, this sheet here, that as long as I keep it lined up with this line, that my board is going to be straight, and it's going to glue on straight and square. So with that being said, let me get a coat of epoxy on this stuff and we'll give it a while to soak in. One thing you don't want to do to a joint when you work with epoxy is to stop it. I always coat everything first, which is the right way to do it. If you don't, if you just try to mix up the epoxy, thicken it, and put it on these joints, what it's going to end up, it's going to be a dry joint and it won't be that strong. Maybe some people do it and get away with it, but it's not the way that I like to do it, and I think most others who do it the right way will do it this way. If you're building these boats, remember, you're going to be on it out on the water, so you don't want it falling apart because you felt like being a cheapskate and skimping on a few things. And underneath this black section that you're seeing, it's a contractor trash bag that I just cut up because I thought I had some clear plastic film, but I guess I don't. But that will work too. I've used it before and it works just as well. So I'm going to give that a few minutes to soak in, and then I have plenty of it in here. I'll come back, add it, and apply some more because that's kind of like end grain and it's going to suck it up pretty good. So I'll apply a little more and let it sit for a while, and then I'll do the thickened epoxy. Okay, I have my thickened epoxy here right now. And I mixed up about 50 milliliters of the slow hardener and then another 100 milliliters of the resin. So a total mix is about 150 milliliters. That's right around 5 ounces. Then I've mixed in the silica powder and a tiny bit of wood flour. So I'll see if this is enough to get both sides of the plywood here. If not, I'll mix up some more. But it's a good test to see what I'll need for doing the rest of these. I'm going to try and slip these boards under here because when I flip this over, I don't want it all coming down on top of something that it's not supposed to come in contact with. I want it to get as close to coming onto that as I can. Okay, now the fun part, getting this thing flipped over. Okay, that's pretty close. I got it lined up as good as I can see it with the line along here. I'm just going to pull these out. Now something I want to make sure here is that the pieces aren't too far together and each of the angles rode up too high, so then I'll have a ridge and I'll have to sand it down. And I'd rather add a little filler in that joint than to have to start sanding it down and losing the thickness of the plywood. Just wanted to get myself a spreader here so I can scrape some of this off. And I'm gonna take this and see how it lines up. Okay, I think once I weight it down, it should be okay. Okay. Yeah, lined up on. I might take it back just a little bit. A tiny bit. It's going to be pretty good once I get it weighted down. And it looks, as it turns out, that 150 milliliters is plenty of it, of the thickened stuff. There's a little bit of waste, but you're not going to get it perfect. Okay, now I want to clamp this one down. Here's in the way of the blocks a little bit. Put it back here. On the other side, get that one clamped. All these clamps will do is keep the boards from separating, and the blocks are going to push the two angled scarf joints together. And the plastic is keeping the blocks from sticking to the plywood, obviously. So I'll leave this to set up overnight. I wish there was a way that I could scarf more panels, or like on top of this or something. But unfortunately, I don't have the room, so this will probably be a little bit slow going. But there's probably be 4 or 5 days worth of scarfing. So we'll check on it again tomorrow. This should be set up by now. Good enough to move it around. So let's take the blocks off and see what we came up with. It doesn't look too bad. Got a little bit of squeeze out there. That's okay. I'll sand that down. I'll just get my sander and we'll sand this down and flip it over, get the other side. So this will conclude episode 4, Scarfing the Panels. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're learning something from it. I'd love to get some comments from you. I get some emails from people talking about things. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy answering all of them. And you can see behind me now I have all my completed scarfed panels. I have them all stacked up on the floor, ready to go when it comes time to planking the hull. But check in very shortly for episode 5, where I'll be setting up the station molds, and you'll really start to see things starting to take shape. So until then, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel, and if possible, just spread the word to people that you think might enjoy the types of videos like this. So, I'll see you at episode 5. Bye-bye.